On the ridge trail, we encounter one of the many stumps here in Buzzard's Roost. I believe these are chestnuts that died in maybe the 1920s, and the tree was cut down, the wood was salvaged, but it had already cured, and so I think this stump might be 100 years old or so. A little past it is a living tree, and that is an older tree in the woods here. It's more open grown. There are branches on the lower parts of it where it grew out in the open and could spread out. The forest has grown around it, but it still shows that it's older in the forest and grew differently. And I've noticed a handful of them along the trail so far. These might have been allowed to stand or grow as shade for livestock, and then when the land here was abandoned, it was already old when the rest of the forest grew up. Although I don't think the hillside was ever farmed, way too steep. Land's very poor on that shale. Just so they cut down the woods, maybe left this one, or it's one of the first to grow up, and it set the pace for the rest of the woods. We continue along the edge of the hilltop, the brow of the hill, and here's another open grown tree that's older than the forest around it. We can see US 50 angling through the valley below, and right here is another one of those stumps that I think are old chestnut stumps, possibly 100 years old. And it looks like this is the rest of the tree, which it seems a stretch that it survived 100 years, but feel free to prove me wrong. When we continue along the trail, another stump and some messy limbs here. We had a branch falling here on the new trail. The ugly scar. It's only going to worsen. The tree is going to fall sometime in the next decade or two, probably. That looks like an oak, white oak, but it was rotten there at the crotch. Such is the life of the forest. On the other side of that scene, we have what my boss 30 years ago, 40 years ago, called a devil tree. This is honey locust. And it is really defensive. There's two of them right here. And one theory as to why it's so aggressively thorny enough to puncture a tractor tire, is that it was food, the seed pods were food for mastodons, and it didn't want mastodons to eat the pods until they were ripe and they fell off the tree. It doesn't want the animal to reach up and grab them, and so the honey is the sweet massive sweetness in the pod around the seeds. The mastodon eats the seed pod because of the sweetness, poops out the seed somewhere else, and plants the tree in a different place. But not until it's ripe. Still eat elephants. We're looking at the hilltop here, which is, I think, it was a pine plantation, like the one over at the corner of the Hoggard Trail, cut down, and I think it's been replanted. I'm not sure why. I think a natural forest progression would be a nice illustration in this park here. But we are across the way from the ravine I looked at and the stump in the tree. This is part of the new purple trail in Buzzard's Roost. I believe it's the overlook trail, right along the edge of the hilltop here. And don't step on one of these thorns. They hurt. Looks like woodpeckers are working on this, I think it's a sassafras tree, also a gum tree, because it often hollows out. It can also be used as a bee gum, a beehive. There's some deep pits here, and I think most of these are where it's looking for insects, but this, well, it doesn't make sense to make a nesting hole this low where predators could get into it. This is a lot of work for some grubs, but I suppose if they're nice and juicy, it's worth it. And this is right next to the Hoggard Trail, facing uphill towards the Hoggard ruins.